Can Greybar help my electrical and datacom jobs be more productive?
Yep, our supply chain services are designed to do just that.
Like job site services?
Yep, we deliver the products you need where and when you need them, no matter your industry.
What if I have technical questions?
Yep, our specialists are top-notch.
Emergency support?
Yep, even after hours.
They're a unicorn.
When you need to keep your projects productive and profitable, rely on Greybar to help you get the job done right. No unicorns required. Yep, Greybar does that.
Good morning, St. Louis, and welcome into Cards Hub 365 here on a Sunday morning. Cardinals coming up with the first pitch at 12:10 p.m., and we're here to get you ready right here on Sports Hub STL. I'm your host for the day, joined by Ethan Hannaford. I'm Matthew Rocchio, and we got some Cards baseball to talk. Ethan, how are you doing today on this beautiful Sunday morning?
Hey, I mean, you can only be so bad when Cards baseball is back, regardless of the questions around the team. We've had some warm weather these last couple of days. I know it hasn't been great, yesterday, and I think it's going to be a little chilly again today. But spring is in the air, and with spring comes baseball, and of course now it's March. It's hard to complain right now if you're a baseball fan.
You're darn right about that. I could not agree more, but we'll find something to complain about. In fact, if you do want to complain, jump into the comments right here. Make sure you like and subscribe to the video right here on YouTube, but also jump into the comments. Let us know your questions, your comments, and again, your complaints from Cardinals spring training baseball. This is, of course, Cards Hub 365, powered by Greybar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. Find them online at greybar.com. You can see on the topic bar there what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to give you guys 5 spring training overreactions that we have from the first couple weeks in spring. But before we do that, we do have a little news coming out of Jupiter, courtesy of lead baseball writer for STL Today and the Post-Dispatch, Derek Gould, who was telling us that we're going to be seeing some movements from the major league roster to the minor league camp. One of the big names that he's reporting right out of the gate about 45 minutes to about an hour ago is that Quinn Matthews is going to go to the minor league camp. This isn't a surprising move for a lot of people. I just think that only seeing Quinn Matthews get the one start and seeing him so dominant in that one start with the major league squad, I think people just wanted to see a little bit more of a runway for Quinn Matthews. So I'm not surprised by this, but I am disappointed. Where do you land on this news for our Sunday morning, Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing for the Cardinals has been, the excitement that the organization has been trying to build around the youth and the talent that they have. So when you finally get a little bit of a taste of that, especially with the struggles of the development system for the Cardinals here these last couple of years, there's been a lot of disappointment with a lot of the young guys that have come up. So when you finally get a little taste of something that's good, you're like, ooh, I want a little bit more of that. So while it is unfortunate that Quinn Matthews, that you're not going to see any more of him against any big leaguers in spring training this year, what he did give us was some excitement in that first start. And reason to be excited for what is to come. Let's not be, or we have to remind ourselves that this is a very young kid. I mean, this is someone that last year jumped through single A, double A, and worked his way up to triple A, 2 levels of single A ball. So this is a kid that moved really fast last year. And I think that, it can be easy to get into that mindset of like, okay, well, let's keep moving him quick. Like, no, let's slow down, press the brakes. Let's make sure that we're handling this the right way. And the Cardinals, I'm sure, saw what they liked from him, but also want to continue preserving, being careful, and helping him develop in the best way possible for him. And to add on to that, it may have gotten mentioned on yesterday's episode, but also another big prospect for the Cardinals, Chase Davis, was also optioned from Major League Camp yesterday. So that's a couple of big names. Obviously, Chase Davis not grabbing the level of attention that Quinn Matthews has, but the Cardinals 2023 first-round pick, big power piece, and showed some solid signs last year in A-ball. So it'll be interesting to see how his 2025 season goes as well.
Yeah, and your point about the development being at a constant rate and that being the smart thing. I think that's the thing. I think if you're reacting negatively to the Quinn Matthews news, it's because you're buying into the idea that the Cardinals are in a youth movement right now. And so you want to see those youth guys play. But part of having a youth movement, part of being youth forward and leaning into your minor league system, to your point, is you have to develop these guys correctly. And so you can't just rush it right out of the gate. And so I like what they're doing with Quinn Matthews. I think it's the smart play. The disappointment's there, but there's a silver lining to the disappointment. Why are we disappointed? Because he looks fantastic. But there are some other young arms that need to get those innings with the major leagues to kind of play out the longer scheme. We're going to be talking about this a little later, but Derek Gould, speaking of how the great work he always does, had a great piece yesterday, or might have been really early this morning, actually, that talked about Tekoa Roby and kind of what he's building to. And you saw in the game yesterday, Sem Robertson finally got some work after allowing 11 straight base runners a few games before that. He puts in 2 innings of pretty solid work. Gordon Graceffo continues to look good. We're going to continue talking about some other younger pitchers here as we roll into our primary topics for today's show, those 5 spring training overreactions. But overall, there's just so many arms right now, and all of them are kind of connected to the fact that this team has been bad the last 2 years because a lot of them have come in trades. There's a lot of arms they're trying to get major league innings and really see what their ceilings are, and I think that's the smart move in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly right there. And just one final thing on these couple of big name prospects for the Cardinals being sent to minor league camp. I mean, with the Quinn Matthews move this morning, that puts the Cardinals at 65 players still in major league spring training camp. That's a lot of players. So, you said it perfectly when you talked about these guys all have to get playing time, and you have to start the deeper into camp that you get. These have to be dedicated to the guys that you're really looking are going to be fighting for spots on this year's roster. And we knew that Quinn Matthews was, no matter how good of a spring he had, he was never going to be fighting for a spot on the major league roster to start the 2025 season. As much as that some fans might not like that is reality. Is there was never a world where he was going to be on this 2025 opening day roster. So you have to, like you said, you have to start giving these young guys that Ollie Marmol, his coaching staff, John Mozeliak, that they all want to see and figure out who's going to be on this opening day roster. You have to continue to amp up their time, and the more guys that you have there, the less time that those guys are going to get to be able to figure out who's going to be on that 2025 opening day roster.
All right, let's dive into our primary topic for today. Obviously, we'll be getting into what's going to be coming up on, I think, mainly only your radios. I'm not really sure what the TV situation is for some of these games by game, so I'm not even going to talk about how you're going to watch it, but you can listen to it definitely, and I think our good friend Claves, the boss man, is going to be involved in the broadcast today, so you can tune into that 12-10 first pitch against the Marlins. We will dive into a little bit around that game later today, but we are going to dive into our main topic here, our 5 spring training overreactions. We're going to pick 5 players and the reactions not only that we're having, but we've seen some media have it. We've seen the fans have it. So please, if you're watching the Cards Hub 365 right now on YouTube, jump into the comments. Let us know some of your spring training overreactions as you've been watching it, whether it's a positive reaction, negative, some mixed reactions. There'll be a little bit of both here as we dive into the main segment. So we're talking about a young pitcher. I say we should lead off with a young pitcher. And I know I mentioned Sem Robertson's really tough game a few games ago. Another young pitcher who has not looked good, who's been on the complete opposite side of the spectrum from your Graceffos and your Matthews, and that's been Tink Hence. Just so much, bottled up into that one guy that you really expect from him, and so far you just haven't seen him really put the numbers up so far in spring.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate to see a little bit of a slow start from Tink. Let's be reminded also that start was against a Yankees lineup that did have a few of their big sluggers in there. And this is a team that you could argue is the number 2 in baseball behind the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I think keep that in consideration. This is still a young guy. I think that while there were some things that weren't working for him, some of the break on some of his pitches wasn't nearly what it was in 2024, where some of that really started to improve a little bit. It looked a little bit more like some of his early years in minor league early years in the minors numbers as far as some of the break on those pitches. But once again, like this is a guy you look at as I pull up Tink Hence's stats here for this season so far. Let's see, it's an inning and a third so far, and while that wasn't pretty, Tink Hence is one of those guys that I think the Cardinals are kind of, I don't want to say necessarily in an in-between with him, but I think that 2025 is going to be a really big year for Tink Hence because you've been really slow in developing this guy. And last year we started to see a little bit of an amp up in the numbers. We started to finally see him crawl into the, consistently 5 innings, 6 innings in the mix there as well. This is going to be a really big year for Tink Hence because I think you're going to find out, start to really figure out what you have in him. We know that fastball has a lot of zip. But we also know that the Cardinals have been very emphatic on wanting to preserve him and be careful with him. So I'm curious as to how 2025 is going to look from him. But, like I said, like we talked about, like we've mentioned, the title of this episode is
Overreactions.
Spring Training Overreactions.
Exactly.
Right? And the biggest thing that I said is this kid has thrown an inning and a third. So while that inning wasn't pretty, listen, I would rather Quinn Matthews be sent down to minor league camp on a good start than Tink Hence be sent down on a bad start, right? I mean,
that's a good way to look at it.
You never want to finish on a bad one. So Tink Hence, young pitcher, still a lot of talent. Last year was he number 2 in the system? Yeah, he was number 2 according to MLB's pipeline last year in the Cardinals system behind only JJ Weatherholt, and before that he was number 1. So this is going to be a kid that's still very highly regarded. Talked about going into spring, a couple of things that he's been working on to just maintain that velocity and that zip, and to just keep things loose. So I'm still really excited for what we are going to be able to see from Tink here this upcoming spring. And like I said, I think the biggest number is an inning and a third.
Yeah, and again, we're overreacting to it because that's the point. But for me, it's just the thing you said is actually where I want to overreact, because it's not necessarily the inning and the third that was really poor, and it was really poor, and there are some issues there. You mentioned the lack of movement on the pitch compared to what his rates were at last year. You saying that he's kind of in that middle ground, the Cardinals don't know what to do with him. Worst thing I could have heard. Absolute worst potential phrase you can stick around Tink Hence, and that's because I personally have Cardinals-induced PTSD thanks to how they treated Zach Thompson, and I still think it's still they don't know what they did to him. They don't know what they were doing in the moment, and they don't know how to fix it. And I'm worried that we're going to get in that same weird loop with other prospects as we go. And the same thing's happening now with Hence, where is he a starter? Well, yeah, he's killing it as a starter in the minors, but he's probably more of a reliever at the top. Well, I mean, is he a long reliever? Is he a closer? No, we should give him a starter. Well, he just kind of sucked that one start, so he's a reliever. Well, he's killing it as a reliever. Maybe we should get him that shot as a starter again. It's just the amount of hand-wringing and non-decisions that actually equate with like 15 decisions that then completely screw with the player's mindset and ability to lock into a role. That, man, I would. It's one thing when you're doing it with a guy like Thompson, that's a complete waste of it. But when you take a guy like Tink Hence, that's just complete potential balled up, and you waste it like this potentially, that would, man, that'll bother me if it happens.
Yeah, you're doing a great job here of the overreacting. You're doing what you said that we were going to do, and so I give you kudos for that. But I understand some of that. I will say this, that a lot of this perspective of like where would he profile better, from everything that I am aware of, is coming from the fan side of things.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is that, and the reason that we know that, is that Tink Hence has been a starter pretty much his entire minor league career. Now, the Cardinals in no way have said or implied that he's going to be a reliever. That doesn't mean that some of his stuff, basically seeing how it profiles, doesn't mean that it wouldn't make sense eventually. And obviously the Cardinals have a lot of veterans right now up, but I don't think anyone once again expects Tink Hence to be on this major league roster come the start of the season, what a lot of people do expect is for the Cardinals to be trying to open up some spots in the starting rotation at this upcoming trade deadline, which could lead potentially to some opportunities. Which could lead to, so who knows what that could lead to for Tink Hence, but it looked like you were trying to say something there, Matthew.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to a little bit of conventional wisdom. I'm not saying the Cardinals aren't thinking this way, but I mean, just running through the years. How many 6'1", 200-pound, how many 6'1", 190-pound starting pitchers have there been? And now that durability and those kind of things in pitchers has become an even bigger thing, I just wonder what is the actual long distance chances of Tink Hence at 6'1", let's say he bulks up to like 205, being able to start 30 games in and out every season. That, I mean, it's a rare quality to have. Now, again, there's a lot of things that Tink Hence has that are rare qualities. And so maybe that's another one. Maybe he can, ball it up like Pedro and do it as an undersized guy, but there's not a ton of history in his favor that I'm aware of. And I could be very wrong about that, but I think there's a lot of fans who react to when they see they see his size and they see his profile and they wonder, is it, just overall for him, is he a starting pitcher for the long run in his career?
Yeah, and that's a fair question, and eventually it's something the Cardinals are going to have to take a look at. I mean, that's something that could very well happen, and I think that those are some good points. And I'll say this as well: spring training early on, just once again going back to that first start. This is a time where a lot of guys are finally able to start honing in on some of the stuff that they worked on in the off season. So it's their first time facing that live talent. So I think that especially going back to first couple of starts, you have to keep some of those things in mind and ask yourself at the same time, if this was in the regular season, how would we react to an inning and a third of struggles, right? So I think those are some great long-term questions for Tink Hence. No, really, I do. But what I'm trying to focus on right now is how can we get Tink Hence to be major league ready, and then we can figure out that other stuff. Okay, how does he profile potentially as a starter, as a reliever? Something that I can confirm that we did hear from Tink Hence at winter warmup this past year is that he was in the gym. He was lifting more than he ever had and gained some serious strength. That kind of thing is going to be important for a guy of his size, as you mentioned, making sure that you're keeping yourself in good strength, in good shape, making sure you're able to preserve to where injuries aren't an issue. And we know that the Cardinals obviously have been very careful with him, trying to avoid that the last couple of years. So hopefully that can be something that helps him with this upcoming season. But overall, there's still a lot to be excited about with Tink Hence. There's a lot of zip on a lot of those pitches, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2025 looks like for him, and honestly, what this spring looks like for him, and how he's going to respond in his next start.
Let's go to space here on the comments, and if you're watching us here on YouTube, jump in on the comments, your question, if you have an overreaction. Space doesn't have one necessarily, but he says he's seen the team not hitting enough, popping up a ton on the socials. We'll be getting to some maybe problems that some people have with some of the hitters here later on, and I don't disagree with Space. If you haven't been able to lock into some of the games, the offensive highlights have been few and far between. And that has been a little bit problematic. But let's keep it with the pitching here with a couple more overreactions. I'm going to give you the next two on this one, Ethan. Hit me with some more pitching overreactions and at least get some positivity here, because I'm being all negative today.
Well, we spent a little bit of time on Tink Hence, but we're gonna flip to the other side, and I want to talk a little bit about Michael McGreevy.
Oh yeah,
talk about a guy that has, I think, been really impressive so far to start off the spring. And once again, if you're going to be careful to overreact to an inning and a third of bad outings so far, then you can't necessarily overreact to 2 innings of good work so far from Michael McGreevy. But the reason I think that it's easier with a guy like Michael McGreevy to be a little bit more optimistic is because we got a little bit of a taste at last year's, at the end of last year, of McGreevy, who came up and had a couple of really good outings. Of course, he had the major league debut where he threw 7 shutout innings, and nobody expected that from McGreevy, who last year I believe was where was he in the prospect system here? I'm looking at, he was number 10 on the Cardinals prospect rankings in 2024. So this is a guy that the Cardinals are excited about. The Cardinals, I think that when you look at, obviously you have your starting 5 that you keep in mind are expected to be kind of the leading 5 of the rotation for the starting squad. But when you look at outside of that, who could be on the outside looking in, fighting for a spot? To me, Michael McGreevy is the one knocking on the door saying, hey, if someone is injured, if someone gets banged up, if someone is struggling and needs or if we need a spot start, right now, in my opinion, Michael McGreevy is that guy. And I think that a huge reason for that is, and I forget which member of the coaching staff it was, but I believe I want to say that it was Dusty Blake, the pitching coach. But don't quote me on that. That he said that he has never seen a pitcher before his debut, before his first start, never be stone cold, be so focused, lack of nerves. And honestly, when we talked to McGreevy last year, pregame, postgame in the clubhouse, you totally got that feeling that this kid was just stone cold, ready to go, and it showed on the mound. He was very impressive in his brief stint up with the major league club, and it gave you very much so this. I'm looking forward to what we could be seeing from Michael McGreevy in 2025. And so when you have that continuation into the spring, even though it's only been 2 innings, when you have that continuation, there's stuff to be excited about, and there's reason to be excited. And I am really excited, and I am. I think that there is a little bit more fair reason to be over optimistic with a guy like Michael McGreevy compared to Tink Hence, based off of the track record of what we saw in that little stint in the majors last year.
Yeah, I'm excited about McGreevy. Is there who do you throw out in that battle you're talking about that to potentially to be the first up if an injury happens, maybe in the big clubs? What other young pitchers do you think are right there around McGreevy fighting for that first chance? Is it Roby in that battle? Is maybe a guy who's been on the outs a little bit over the last couple of years, might slink back in a little bit? Maybe one of a veteran we haven't talked about lately. Who else do you think is in that battle?
Yeah, great question. I think that right now, the main ones that you have to consider, I think McGreevy is the frontline guy, but I think that you can't ignore what Gordon Graceffo has been doing so far to start off his stint here. Last year also got a little bit of a taste of the majors and was fine in his couple of outings. It wasn't as standout as McGreevy's was, but he still looked good, and he's had a good spring so far. He's gotten a couple. He's thrown in 2 games so far, 4 innings, and his numbers look good. 6 strikeouts in 4 innings, which is an optimistic piece as well. So Gordon Graceffo is definitely a big one. Outside of that, someone that I'm very intrigued as to what are the Cardinals going to do with him is Matthew Liberatore. And the reason that I say that is I talked about this on one of our recent podcast episodes on the Loose Sports Talk, is Matthew Liberatore. It has been in the middle, in between spot these last couple of years where his stuff looks really good first time through a lineup, and then he starts to have issues. So the Cardinals, what did they do in 2024? They threw him in the bullpen, and boy, did it work. I mean, he was phenomenal in the bullpen last year, and I think that there's a lot of reason to be excited about him. But I don't think that they have closed the window to Matthew Liberatore being a starter down the road. What I do think, though, is that if you're the Cardinals, you finally have found something that works for Libby. Continue to build with that. So while I do see Liberatore potentially as an option, we saw him a couple of times last year get some spot starts, even though he was in the bullpen. I think that was more so because the Cardinals didn't see anyone in AAA that they felt comfortable with, that they could bring up and say, we're confident that you're going to be able to give us solid innings and keep us in a game. I don't think that's going to be the issue this year. So while Liberatore technically is an option, I don't know if I see him starting at this point over a Gordon Graceffo, a Michael McGreevy because of the success he's had in the bullpen. And then, of course, Samuel, I am not ignoring you. I just had to get through Libby talk there. Zach Thompson is obviously the other one. We saw a little bit of Zach Thompson in 2023 after the Cardinals sold their soul at the trade deadline. And we finally start to see him get a little bit of work. And
other people would call it an investment in the future, but sure.
that is a more optimistic way to talk about it. And a little teaser, we're going to be talking about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. But yeah, Zach Thompson, we saw him get a little bit of work back in 2023 once the Cardinals did sell at the trade deadline, and there was some things to be optimistic about. And I remember asking Oliver Marmol post game after one of those starts, is he doing enough work to where he is throwing himself into consideration for a starting spot for 2024? And he said yes. And we saw some positive signs from him. And then in 2024, things just took a turn for the worse. The velocity. I mean, we went from seeing this guy throwing, mid 90s to touching low 90s. And there was a huge question mark as to what happened with Zach Thompson over the offseason to where that velocity tick on the fastball just completely dipped off. So he spent most of the 2024 season in the minors working on that. His numbers began to improve as the year went on towards the end of the season. And we haven't really seen, I don't think, that much of Zach Thompson so far here. I'm looking through the numbers.
Just what we've seen in one game so far. It was one inning, faced 3 batters, nothing really happened much, walked a guy, got out of the inning without any problems. But I mean, I talked about it at the very beginning of the episode. I just think they've messed with him, and it's affected it's affected every part of his game, I think. And
yeah,
that's been kind of disappointing.
It's hard to know if there is something that it's hard to know what caused that drop off in that velocity, if it's something that the Cardinals said they wanted him to work on, or if it was just, like I said, the off season going into spring training. That's time where these guys are working on stuff, trying to figure things out. And then who knows? I mean, there could have been a nagging injury or something. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that it could end up being. So whether it's on the Cardinals or not, it's hard to know. But what we do know is that the numbers weren't at the quality of level that they were in 2023 for Zach Thompson last year. And the hope is that he can find that, because the kid has some talent. And last year we were talking about him being an option going into the year for a starting spot. And obviously he disappointed. So I would love to have Zach Thompson in the conversation for could he be earning himself some starts in 2025. But I do think that there are a couple of guys that have climbed him on the totem pole since then, and I think that I would put him in the 3 or 4 spot. Those are kind of the main names that come to mind when I think of who could be competing for that, the 6th man spot, if that makes sense.
You're listening to Cards Hub 365 on Sports Hub STL. We're powered by Greybar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. Find them online at greybar.com. Miles Mikolas' numbers through 2 starts in spring in almost every facet are either right at his career average or better than the last couple years. Fool's gold, or is Miles Mikolas going to be a solid back of the rotation starter for the Cardinals this year?
It is so hard.
We want is just somebody that you can stick there for 33 times in the 5th part of the rotation who's going to give you 5 2/3 and less than 3 runs. That level of stability. Again, it's not going to win you a ton of games, but that level of stability would be so nice to have this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when you look at what Miles Mikolas has done the last couple of years, obviously it has been a drop off from where he was in 2021, 2022. Even in 2023, he still got to the 200 inning mark, which, I know it was a big thing for him wanting to get there even in the drop off, but 2024 for him was just a I mean, it was a brutal season, and the biggest issue, and it wasn't any secret that Oliver Marmol talked about, that Miles Mikolas talked about, was the struggle with 2 strikes. We know that Miles Mikolas is going to pound the zone. He pounded it too much last year to the point where he was just getting hit all over the ballpark, and it was tough to watch because you love Miles. He's one of those beating heart guys of this clubhouse. He's a leader. He loves to have fun. But it's hard when you're having that level of difficulties to be able to also carry that role at times, I'm sure. So Miles Mikolas, I mean, it was an issue. I mean, even on the home run that he allowed in his first outing of the spring, it was a 2-strike home run. I want to see him be a lot more careful with 2 strikes in 2025. And once again, look at you look at the numbers that we've seen from good old Moose so far, and it's been 4 2/3 innings. I mean, so are the numbers okay? Yes, but it's been 1 outing. So I think the biggest thing with Miles Mikolas is if he can find a way to be able to still locate specifically that fastball, but not put it right over the center of the plate. If you can find ways to keep hitters off balance, then he's going to be okay. The expectation is not what it was for him a couple of years ago. I mean, for goodness sake, this was your opening day starter in 2023. Was he your opening day starter last year too?
Let me check Cardinals
I don't
opening day
even remember
starters.
who we played last year on. No, the Dodgers. He was, because he got hit up. Yeah. He got beat up by the Dodgers. Yes. So now he obviously wasn't supposed to be your number 1 starter last year. That role was supposed to go to Sonny Gray, but he started the season on the injured list because of the hamstring stuff. Miles Mikolas has gone in 2 years from being your number 1 starter to being your number 5 starter. That's the reality of where he is. But hopefully with that, or most definitely with that come loosened expectations. Hopefully attached to that, he's able to meet those expectations a little bit more. Eat you innings, preserve your bullpen. We know that was a huge issue for the Cardinals last year, is they had a lethal bullpen, but they gassed out halfway through the season because the starting pitching wasn't holding its own at times. Samuel being very open and honest today about how he feels about Miles Mikolas.
To your point, by the way, Miles Mikolas, both 2023 and 2024, the opening day starter. And a little trivia question for you: Miles Mikolas has 3 opening day starts in a Cardinals uniform, because he also was the opening day starter back in 2019 against the Milwaukee Brewers. He is also 0-3, or the Cardinals are 0-3 in opening day starts under Miles Mikolas. 3 of the last 7 opening day starts, or last 6, I should say, last opening day starts have been by Miles Mikolas. There's a little stat for you.
Anytime you bring up pre-COVID and 2019, I'm like, what happened?
It was a thing that happened. Let's keep moving on here. Let's move on to some batters here. And in fact, Kareem is preempting us. He knew our list, Ethan. We're predictable. As impressive as VS2 has been so far, I'd like to see him start the season in AAA. If that happens, I think guys like Koperniak could break camp with the team. Let's address the first half of this text, because VS2 was going to be on our overreaction list. Overreacts to this speed, much like the entirety of St. Louis did last year, Ethan Hannaford.
Listen, Victor Scott has a lot of talent. There's a lot of potential there, and we saw it last year in spring training. Listen, Victor Scott was never going to be on this opening day roster to start off the 2024 season until Dylan Carlson had the shoulder issue when he and who was it that collided with Carlson? I'm blanking out, but it was in those stupid Cubs spring training games that they played in Arizona. Jordan, I think it was Jordan Walker. But regardless, that unfortunately put the Cardinals in a really tough spot, to where the Cardinals expected to go into the spring of last year. By the spring, I mean the regular season spring, to compete. And there was nobody else on this roster that you could have really plugged in that spot. They didn't feel comfortable with Lars Nootbaar in center field. And because of that, Victor Scott got rushed a little bit. And I don't think anyone would necessarily disagree and say that was the way that the Cardinals wanted things to go with him. Fortunately, eventually Michael Ciani started to have a little bit more of a role, a little bit more of an impact. And the amount of time Victor Scott eventually got sent back down to AAA. And this was a guy that really hadn't spent any time in AAA prior to that little stint last year. So it took a little while for him to get going last year in Memphis, but did start to see a little bit of production later in the year, and the numbers have been really good to start off the spring of 2024. As I take a look here at the numbers for VS2. Come on, where are these silly numbers? I'm trying to find here on the.
They're always easy to find.
On the snap. Here they are. I was like, you got to find Victor.
They are impossible to find every time you struggle for them. They're good, though. Slash line of 5.
Yeah, 5 for 9, a triple, a home run, 3 runs driven. He's walked 3 times, which that's the one that I really like seeing. I mean, obviously, you like the power that we've seen.
Numbers are stupid. This is just the most spring training stat line I've ever seen for a guy that you're trying not to overreact about. Like, of course, he doesn't make it easy. Good for him. Win yourself a job, young fella.
The thing where I think with this, while you love seeing it, the thing where it's like, okay, I mean, are you going to overreact? I mean, in 9 at bats, he has a home run and a triple. Victor Scott, is not a power guy. I mean, this is not a guy that you're going to expect at any point when he's in the majors to be a power guy. So while I do love seeing him be able to mix that in, I said that I was most excited about the 3 walks, and the reason that I am is that all this guy has to do is get on base. He's that fast. He will be the fastest player in Major League Baseball if he can just get on base. So I do like seeing that, and I think that my guy Kareem makes a great point that he has been great so far, but the Cardinals have some question marks because Nolan Arenado is still with this major league club as to what they're going to do with figuring out a way to make sure everyone gets playing time. And if you try to keep both Victor Scott and Michael Ciani on this major league roster, then one of them is not going to get the playing time that they're going to be hoping for. Honestly, I think that St. Louis is hoping for. We'll run through the chain reaction real quick. Nolan Arenado, because he's still on this team, he's the starting third baseman. That moves where we all expected Nolan Gorman to be at third base if Arenado would have gotten traded. He goes back to second. Who does that affect? That affects Thomas Saggese, who we're going to get to here also in a little bit. But that affects Thomas Saggese, who was primarily he's battling for a utility spot, but was primarily going to get that time at second base. Who else does it affect? It affects Brendan Donovan, who now will have to play much more in the outfield than he would have. He would have been mixing in with Saggese at second base. Because Donovan is in the outfield, now you have to figure out what you're going to do with these guys. Lars Nootbaar, Jordan Walker, Brendan Donovan, and then you throw in Victor Scott and Michael Ciani. That's 5 guys for 3 positions. And unless the Cardinals are willing to have Lars Nootbaar play center field consistently, then someone's going to have is going to be
someone's missing innings that they need to develop,
right? Because
is the entire thing that we've been talking about now for I think like 2 seasons, which is they can't figure out how to get out of their own way when it comes to the build of the roster.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Lars Nootbaar doesn't play center field, then you know that you're going to have Victor Scott and Michael Ciani. They're going to be your couple of options for center field, but if you do have Lars Nootbaar in center field, then that's going to limit either Ciani or Scott. I think that Scott is the one long-term that you're a little bit more optimistic about. So I think that you're going to be wanting to put him more in, preserve him a little bit more, make sure he's getting consistent playing time. But that also then creates the issue if Nootbaar's not playing center, if one of those guys is in center field, Ciani or Scott, then you have Alec Burleson, you have Jordan Walker, and you have Brendan Donovan, and it's like this, where are you going to put everyone? How are you going to make this work? Listen, I trust Ollie Marmol enough to figure out that he's going to be able to maneuver this and figure this out, but it is tough when you have so many guys where you're trying to give everyone the playing time, but because it's not nearly as much of a youth movement as you were hoping for, the Cardinals are stuck in this really tough in-between spot. Samuel asking about Alec Burleson, on the corner outfielders field positions. Burley's in a tough spot once again because there are, people would argue that Jordan Walker figuring out what he is more important to the development of this team, but also they would probably put Lars Nootbaar above him as well. And Burley's nowhere near the most talented defensive outfielder, so it does make more sense for him to be at first base and DHing. He's going to mix with Wilson Contreras at first base, and then he's going to, I imagine, probably be in this three-headed monster of DH with Nolan Gorman, Wilson Contreras, and then him. But it's going to be difficult because these guys are all going to be bouncing around. It feels like different positions every single day. And I just want to say real quick, back to Matt Koperniak. I know that Kareem has been really big on Matt Koperniak here these last couple of years. And in my mind, Matt Koperniak kind of profiles for me kind of like Michael Ciani did last year, except Koperniak in the sense of not necessarily like playing style, but more so in a similar position in the sense of he kind of was on the outside looking in last year. But Michael Ciani proved through his play that he deserved to be a part of this opening day roster. And I think that we could see a similar thing with Koperniak, who has looked pretty good here to start off the spring. It's only been 12 at-bats so far, but 4 for 12 and has 1 walk, has only struck out once. So the plate appearances have been good. I know that Kareem has been really high on him. So he's definitely a guy, like I said, if you're not going to overreact about the negative guys, you can't overreact about the positives. But Matt Koperniak is definitely a guy who's going to be, it would not surprise me if he comes down to being one of the final guys at minimum on this spring training roster fighting for a slot on opening day.
Yeah, just it feels like much like Ciani, something's going to happen to the roster for him to that spot to open up. Speaking of the roster, by the way, they're throwing baseballs down at Roger Dean Stadium in Jupiter. The starters today, the Steven Matt's probably a name we should have thrown out in that competition for that 6th man in the rotation. Steven Matt still facing off against Edward Cabrera for the Marlins. The lineup for the Cardinals today, and this might be interesting to you, Ethan, as you kind of went through the domino effect in the lineup. I know it's a spring training lineup, but really there's only one name that's kind of spring trainy in here. And so let's go through it. Mason Wynn leading off, playing shortstop. Brendan Donovan playing second base, batting second. Lars Nootbaar batting third and is in left field. Nolan Arenado batting fourth at third base. Ivan Herrera is behind the plate, batting fifth. Nolan Gorman is batting sixth at the DH spot. Jordan Walker is in right field, batting seventh. Luken Baker at first base, batting eighth. And then Michael Ciani in center field, batting ninth for the Cardinals. On the other side, it's Edward Cabrera, the righty for the Marlins. Connor Norby at third base, batting first. Jesus Sanchez at center field, batting second. Jonah Bride, first baseman, batting third. In cleanup, it's Kyle Stowers over in right field. Dane Myers is their DH, batting fifth. Liam Hicks behind the plate, batting sixth. Max Acosta, the shortstop, and the 7th spot. Javier Sonoya, in left field, batting eighth, and lining up for the Marlins at ninth is Jared Cerna playing second base. So I thought it was a little interesting there. Maybe not the order. I don't expect Lars Nootbaar to be batting third very often. You'd probably expect Wilson Contreras in there at first base instead of Luken Baker. Then you shuffle Contreras up to third, Arenado at fourth, Herrera at fifth still kind of seems live. Gorman at DH, Walker, Ciani. Just that doesn't seem like it's very far off of what we could see very commonly throughout this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like you said, there's a couple of bits and pieces there. Yeah. I mean, Wilson Contreras played yesterday, hit that 453-foot bomb. So, I mean, that's why he's not in the lineup today. But, yeah, I mean, in large part, this looks like a good chunk of these guys could be guys that we're seeing in the opening day lineup. Not necessarily in this order because there are a couple of starters that are out, but it would not surprise me to see this be a lot of these guys. I mean, I'm trying to think here. The only guys that and here's the thing. I mean, Alec Burleson is probably going to see his playing time impacted as well by this. I mean, where does he go? I mean, if Ciani's going to be your opening day center fielder, and if you want to get Gorman the time, but Donovan's going to play at second, then Alec Burleson, who was outside of Mason Wynn, probably the most pleasant surprise on last year's team, then you're looking at him potentially, not even being an opening day starter, which would be unfortunate. It's a good problem to have to figure out, man, like you have enough talent to where you can't play it all, but it it's also kind of unfortunate because you want to make sure that you can figure out what you have in these guys.
Okay, well, let's talk about a balance here, because let's go to our final overreaction so far for the spring, and this is where the conversation is, because you're saying that right now one of the only spots that Burleson might get in is that DH rotation. Well, starting in the DH spot today, the guy you should think should be your DH, because, well, he can't play second base or third base because Nolan Arenado's still on the roster, and that's Nolan Gorman. And he's striking out quite a bit here in the spring, and it's causing a reaction from a lot of people. So it might be kind of the balance where you're saying it's unfortunate we can't get Burleson the looks early in the season, but maybe he gets those looks because maybe Nolan Gorman isn't your DH out of the gate because of his struggles in spring. Overreaction, or is there something palpable here that maybe builds on the worry that Nolan Gorman isn't going to be able to break out from being the inefficient 200 strikeout hitter who doesn't hit enough with enough power consistently to overcome?
Great question. And honestly, outside of the Nolan Arenado saga, the noise that him returning to the Cardinals has brought, the player arguably that has had the most eyes on him has been Nolan Gorman in the spring. And that's because of it. Because of the trickle effect of, okay, how does it affect him? You were expecting this guy to get 500, 600 at-bats this year, plate appearances, playing at third base. The Cardinals still want to be able to give him the reps that they feel he needs. But, I mean, let's be honest here. This is a guy that has gotten worse progressively the last 2 years. I mean, 2023 was one heck of a roller coaster for Gorman. I mean, we saw some weeks where he was one of the best players in baseball, all of baseball. And then we saw some months where it looked exactly like what a good chunk of 2024 looked like. And then you move on to 2024, and it was an absolute mess. The strikeouts were at an all-time high for him. He was on the edge, nearing major league record as far as strikeout percentage goes for the amount of time that he was playing. He was at Chris Davis level. I mean, like, he was really struggling. The problem with him is that, I mean, he went down to AAA last year. I'm trying to figure out what Nolan Gorman can be working on right now, like, to improve, because it feels almost like this, unless you're figuring it out at the major league level with him. In the minors, I mean, the numbers weren't bad for him. He was still hitting his home runs. They weren't great, but what can you be working on to help you improve with him? In my opinion, you're almost in this situation where you have to just let him figure it out at this level. And maybe that's wrong, but we look back at how 2024 went for him. Even when he was in the minors, I mean, the power was still there. Was he striking out some? Sure, but this is a guy that came into the 2023 season after his little stint in 2022, and it talked about the adjustments that he had made to be more contact heavy. I'm wondering where that Nolan Gorman went. And obviously, like, you know, the more time that you're in the majors, the more pitchers are going to learn how they can beat you. And we saw that issue with Jordan Walker last year. So I'm not saying that it's as simple as the more time you're here, the easier it gets. But you do hope that there is an adjustment that Gorman can be making. And so far, early in the spring, it hasn't looked great. We know that he did work on some swing adjustments in the offseason. Let's hope that this is just a kind of getting into the swing of things, no pun intended, for a guy like Nolan Gorman, who is still looking for his first hit of the spring. I think he has struck out in 7 of his 12 at-bats. I know it can be, because of how last year went, it can be really easy to start panicking about Nolan Gorman. This is the one that I feel like it's the easiest to kind of get a little nervous about. But I'm still going to encourage Cardinal fans to be patient. Give Nolan Gorman a little bit more time. The potential is there, but we're beyond time for the potential. We need to start seeing the results from this guy. And we talked about it's different because it's not in the same wavelength about 2025 being a big year for Tink Hence. It's going to be a way bigger year for Nolan Gorman.
Yeah, and it should be a big year. And then we got some conversations going here between Samuel and Eddie talking about JJ Weatherholt. Samuel saying JJ Weatherholt's the third baseman of the future. Eddie, is Weatherholt projected as the third baseman? Assumed he would be prime for second, but I don't know enough about him. And then Samuel says they want him to continue at shortstop because it is more demanding for him athletically. All I remember from his scouting report is that his arm is probably the one tool that isn't like A grade in his game, like fielding good, hitting for contact power, like the whole 5-tool thing, he's got it, but his arm power isn't great. And so I'm guessing the idea would probably be to mitigate, him, more to the middle infield on probably second base more often than not. I'm guessing is the future of JJ Weatherholt based on just that little piece of scouting we heard. I haven't heard anything. I mean, we've heard a lot about his hitting. I haven't necessarily heard anything that says that scouting point was inaccurate or that he's been working on his arm strength to the point where he would be better over there. But I could be wrong about that. Yeah,
I mean, with JJ Weatherholt, right now he's set up to where the Cardinals are going to be wanting him to be the second baseman of the future. That has been the talk. I think we're covered at shortstop for the next few years. As Cardinals fans, I think Mason Wynn's holding his own there. And obviously, I think the mindset has been Nolan Gorman is going to be your third baseman of the future. If we have another repeat 2024 season, maybe we're going to have to start asking questions about that. JJ Weatherholt did play all three of those positions on the infield at West Virginia in college. So you are correct in talking about that was the arm profile doesn't the arm strength doesn't profile nearly as good for that side of the diamond as it does for second base, but strong infielder. But the arm strength isn't necessarily there. Could he potentially be a guy that's in the mix over at third? I'm not going to say no, but I would say that he definitely, as of now, has profiled much more so as this is going to be the guy that's going to be at second base for the future.
Yeah, if Gorman struggles this year and eventually you do get rid of Arenado, I would just assume that 2026, like Brendan Donovan slides into third base.
Yeah,
I think that would be pretty well established.
I think that's the one that makes the most sense. We've seen Donovan get a little bit of time there, but he hasn't really had to get much because Nolan Arenado is, I mean, he stays healthy. I mean, he rarely is injured. So he plays obviously the large amount of time over at third base. But yeah, if something were to happen and Arenado got traded or there was an injury and Gorman was struggling to the point where he gets sent down or isn't playing every day, if Gorman is on this roster, he's going to play every day. The priority is not for this club to win a World Series this year. That this team is not ready for that. So if you're going to have him up, he's got to be playing just about every day because you have to be getting him the reps, in my opinion. There might be people out there that disagree with that. Samuel talking about if Gorman doesn't work out, Jordan Walker was a third baseman. I wouldn't lie if I didn't say that it did come to mind. He did play third base. He did play third base. On his way up, but
good on that.
I mean, you look at someone of his physique. What is he? 6'5"?
Yeah, we're going to keep him on the right side of the diamond. Whether it's first base or right field, we're going to keep him on the right side of the diamond.
Yeah, I think that's probably what makes a little bบmore sense for a guy like
he's
Jordan.
6'5". Why are we? Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe he'll be able to reach over and grab some over the line, like a slightly larger Scott Rowland. But I'm not going to put my money on that.
And I'll say that, it's this is obviously a lot of overreact talk or a lot of what if talk. What happens if Nolan Gorman struggles again and we have to be looking at a different position? Why can't we just hope that Nolan Gorman has a great 2025 and he hits 40 bombs and we're all set for the future there? It wouldn't be that easy as a Cardinals fan. It's never that easy. So, no, the talk makes sense.
Can you pick out my lottery numbers?
Maybe well see. Well, that might be a conversation after we hop off here. But who knows?
By the way, quick little thing. I knew Scott Rowland was a big guy. His baseball ref profile lists him as 6'4", 245, And I would have lost a bet if I had to actually like guess that before I looked it up. I did not realize. God, Roland was a monster.
It's a big boy.
God,
It's
he's
a big boy.
I don't know. Maybe we will see Jordan Walker playing a little third base like Scotty Rowland was in all those great years of Cardinal baseball. Hopefully, we have some return of those great years of Cardinal baseball. But we'll see if any of these overreactions play out. We had some good ones. We had some negative ones. We had some mixed reactions. But all in all, we had a great little show today. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. We went really long. We had such a good group here in the comments and watching on that we just had to keep rolling with some Cardinals talk. They're in action down in Jupiter. Again, some interesting factors playing in today. You got Steven Matz, who's going again. I think anytime he's pitching and he's healthy and he's looking interesting as a major league pitcher, it could be interesting going forward. You got Mason Wynn leading off. Nolan Gorman's batting 6th. Jordan Walker's right behind him. A little bit of Michael Ciani and Lucan Baker also in the back end of that lineup. A lot of interesting things here for the Cardinals spring training. We also have a game coming up on FanDuel on Tuesday, which will be televised to kind of wrap up this show from the very beginning. So go ahead and listen to some Cardinals baseball. Go ahead and look back from the beginning of this podcast. Go to YouTube. You can rewatch Cards Hub 365. If you missed any of our 5 big spring overreactions throughout the chat today, go back, rewatch the whole pod right there on YouTube. Go ahead and like and subscribe. That way, next time we do go live, you'll be notified and you can join us for the entire thing. Also, whenever there is an event happening in Cardinal sports, we are covering it right here on Sports Hub STL. You can catch me on Billikens and City post games. You can catch Ethan there talking about Cardinals baseball like he just did for a fantastic hour. You can also catch him talking Blues on our Blues Hub post game as well. So that's Ethan Hannaford. I'm Matthew Rocchio. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today on Sports Hub STL. Ethan, you have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You as well. Go Birds.
Go Birds, and have a great day, St. Louis.